Hello and welcome to the Abstract Studio training channel brought to you by enSYNC Corporation. Today's video will be covering session management and how to utilize session management in Abstract Studio. This can be one of the more robust and challenging areas to gather understanding and utilize in Abstract Studio, just for the sheer reason because so many different organizations have so many different ways of implementing and using session management. I've broken this down into a series of 5 steps. The first one will be creating the time blocks, which time blocks are kind of synonymous with rooms and times. The second step will be to create a session form, which will provide a foundation for a session. We'll then link the session form to the event, which will make it available for use in Abstract Studio for creating sessions. We'll then create the sessions and link submissions to those sessions. And then finally link the sessions to the time blocks, which is basically the where and when you want them to present. Now, to get a foundation of understanding, let me go through a few definitions to help understand when we say certain things in Abstract Studio what we're talking about. The first one is sessions. Sessions in Abstract Studio are just holders of single or multiple submissions that will be assigned to a time block or time to be presented. Submissions are the proposals that are entered by your submitters through Abstract Studio to be considered for acceptance to present at the event. Accepted submissions are linked to sessions, which will then be linked to time blocks, the schedule. Those time blocks are moments of time for each day of the event in each available room. Sessions are assigned to them to set the presentation schedule. So if you take a look at the grid I show at the bottom here, you see each day of the week that the event is scheduled for. Then in the block column you see block or room numbers. And then you see along the top the times for each of the sessions. So in room 1, between 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock, you see professionalism in your field. And then another session accepting exceptionalism from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. And then you can follow along with the rest of the rooms and the time blocks where there will be presentations given. So now that you have a basic understanding of that, let's move on to how to create your time blocks. And before we get started with creating the time blocks, I just wanted to let you know that as of this recording, Section 6 of our documentation goes through the processes that we'll be covering on how to set up sessions and session management area of Abstract Studio. So please refer to that for further explanations and descriptions of what we'll be doing. So starting with step 1, which is creating time blocks, we're going to click on the Create Time Blocks link in the Manage the Event section. Once the page refreshes, we'll select the event we want to work with. And you'll see I kind of got a head start here. I started setting up some rooms and time blocks just to give you an idea of how this is going to play out. So in the left column here you see room 1 and room 2. You don't have to necessarily know the room names or numbers at the time of setting up your time blocks and slotting sessions. Oftentimes most people don't know until they get closer to the day of conference. So if I click on this default, you can see up at the top in the edit time block information is here. So I can actually change this room block name to whatever it turns out to be when we get closer to conference. Okay? So you can see that this first area is for Monday from 8 to 11. And you can see this default field. What I did is I put some information in there so you can see what that is. So you can set this up as the title. Let's say, for instance, you were setting up this time block for an open session or a welcome call or something to that effect. You could actually plug that in there if you want. If you put nothing in that field, if I click on this none field, you'll see that's what reports there. A lot of people use that to be the submission title or something down the road once they get that information in there. So what we'll do is I'm going to click on room 2 and I'm going to copy this room information, or I should say block, because you want it spelled exactly. If you're going to add to that, you don't want to add an additional one. If I were to misspell this and say ROM to, it would create an additional block, and I don't want to do that. I'll paste my information in there, keeping that for Monday, and we're going to make this a 10:30 a.m. to noon p.m. time block, and we'll save that. Click the OK for confirmation. My page will refresh, and now you can see I've got my new time block in there. Let me update that. I meant to make that at 10:30, so it's very simple. You just edit it by clicking it, and it'll update for you. So now you can see I've got some separation in time there. So now if I wanted to add a new block or a new room, I'll just type in there 3. Copy and paste that in there, and I'll just say 7:30 to 10:30, and we'll save that. And that's basically how you set up your schedule. You can work your way down through your rooms by room or time block per room. Like I said, when you get closer to conference and you find out what the actual room names or numbers are where you're going to be having these blocks of time where you're going to have sessions, you can update that information at that time. Just as an example, let's say we want to make this room 3A. I'll make that 3A. I will save that. And that just illustrates for you to see the change that takes place. So if you imagine you had a different room number or the name of the room, you would plug that in there, and then that would update. And then when you pull that in a report, it would have the proper room name with the proper time blocks. There is a way to mass import the blocks and the times if you have that all set. We have a spreadsheet that you can use and actually import that directly into the database, so you wouldn't have to do this one by one as I've just illustrated for you. During your implementation, we can discuss that and we can set that up for you. Your dates that are appearing in the different tabs are actually pulling from IMIS as your event is set up. So it has all the inclusive dates for that. So as you're setting up your time blocks, you'll want to make sure you're on the correct day by either choosing the tab, or as you're setting up the block, clicking on the date drop-down. So now we move on to step 2, which is to create a session form. Just to reiterate, the definition of a session in Abstract Studio is that they're placeholders of single or multiple submissions that are going to be assigned to a time block. The session form is merely used as a link for a session to a time block where the submissions will finally be linked to for presentation scheduling. So now to create the session form, what we'll do is we'll go into the Site Administration Form Management area and click on the Manage Submission Form Layouts. We'll click on Make New, click on the Open Form Definition button, and then we'll enter the title and description of the form. For ease, I'm just going to call this the ACOP, which is the Annual Conference of Professionals 2014, and I'm just going to put a prompt in there to remind myself that this is a session form. I'll copy and paste that there. Then over on the right, I will click on Session, because this is a session form. And then I'm going to just click on Session Organizer, click on the Save button, and that's it. The form has now been created. The next step in the process is going to be linking this form to the event so that it's available for assignment of sessions. So in order to link this to the correct event, I'll click from here. I'll go to Submissions Home. I'll scroll down again in the Form Management area, click on the Link Session Forms to Events link. I'll find the form that I just created. There's the ACOP 2014. I'll highlight that. I'll find my event, which when I hover over that, I can also see my event code. I know that this is the one I want to link to. I'll click on the Submit button. I get confirmation that that is done, And now I can go to Submissions Home and continue on now with the next step in the session management process. Well, we covered steps 2 and 3 in the previous segment, so now we're up to step 4, which is creating sessions and linking submissions to the sessions. A little bit more explanation for you of what we're going to be doing. You're going to be able to create all of your sessions all at once, or you can create them as you go. So if you get your schedule together and you understand how many sessions you're going to have to set up, you can just set them up as you go. So there's no need to do everything all at once. We're going to run through the minimum steps that are required to create a session, and there's going to be additional fields shown, and those can be explained during your implementation to help you take advantage of those for other purposes you may have. And the sessions that you're going to be creating are going to be what you'll be linking the accepted submissions to for scheduling into the time blocks. So our next step now is to create sessions, and then we're going to link the submissions to those sessions. So in the Manage the Event area, we're going to click on the Group Submissions into Sessions link. We'll then select our event. We're still working on that annual conference of professionals. We're going to click on the Make New Session link. And we'll put in our IMIS ID. In my case, mine is 11. And this can be any administrator, anyone that is usually charged with setting up the sessions. We're going to select the session form. Remember that ACOP form we created in one of the previous sections? And this session title, this is totally subjective. This is entirely up to how you want to use this. This can be the name of the submission you intend to link to the session. This can be based on a topic area that the session may have to do with if you're going to put a group of submissions to this. So again, this is entirely subjective. So for our purposes, I'm just going to put session 1 just so for tracking purposes. The next thing would be the session code. I'm going to put GS001. It really doesn't matter what I'm using in this case. This may be based on whatever your organization uses to track sessions with some naming convention. GS001 in my mind stands for General Session 001, which is the first general session. So again, in working with this, you'll find ways that you want to use this and adapt it to what you currently use and move forward from there. So these are the minimum things to fill in. As I said previously, we're just going to fill in the minimum fields. But as you can see, there are considerable other fields that can be renamed and used to track data points by each session as required in your organization. Again, we can cover this during your implementation, but let's just move forward. So once we've got this information filled in, I'm going to click on the Save button, and then I will close the window. At which point now you can see the auto session ID is 250. That code that I put in, the GS001, is how you can track that. The type is blank right now. I'll show you how we can get data to actually show up there if you're going to use that. And then the title that I entered, session 1, is appearing there. And you can see that I am the organizer. If you ever need to edit anything in this session, you would just click on the Edit button. And let's just, for argument's sake, make that session 1A. Click on the Save button and close that. And you can see immediately my change has taken place. So the next step in this process is to add submissions to the session. So as I click on my session, you can see the 3 submissions that I have for the Annual Conference of Professionals of 2014. I can see that they are not assigned sessions yet. Green means they are available to be selected. I can see the submission ID. I can see the title of the submission itself. I can see the status of the submission. I can see who submitted it and the company or organization that the submitter is part of. Now, these are just accepted submissions. I don't have any others right now, but if I had a string of submitted submissions or some that are still in open status, I would not want to necessarily consider those to be assigned to sessions. So I can take advantage of the accepted only. When I check that box, it would rerun the query and it would present just the submissions that are in accepted status. So now, in order to assign a submission or link it to this session 1A, I would just click on the checkbox, and I see the change has taken place, which now shows that session 1A has submission 246, analytical thinking, reasoning, assigned to it. In the interest of saving some time in the video, I jumped ahead and created 2 additional sessions, and I'm going to show other controls that you have here. So if I click on the show all assigned, I can see the assigned sessions as well at the top. So if I deselect that, you see that's hidden. So that's to help clear up the view at the bottom, so you only have to look at the submissions that need to be assigned. If you do click that box and you see it's in red and the box is checked, that means it's unavailable to be selected to go into the session you may be trying to load up submissions to. So I'm going to go ahead and link this submission to session 2, and then session 3 I will link that. Once we're done with that, we'll go on to the next step for the session management portion. The 5th and final step for this video in the session management portion of Abstract Studio is going to be linking the sessions to the time blocks. So up to this point, we've created the time blocks, we've linked submissions to sessions, and now we're going to take those sessions and plug those into the time blocks or your schedule for your conference. So we'll go through those steps and then review at the end. So here's where we left off. We created our sessions and then we linked our submissions to the sessions. Now, working from this page, we don't necessarily have to go back to the submissions home to the main menu to go to the next step. All these steps have the menu items on the related pages. So now to link the sessions to the time blocks, we're going to go ahead and click on the Link Sessions to Time Blocks link. And then we're going to start working through the time blocks to assign the sessions. Now, just to give you a rundown of what you're seeing in this page, you see the time block ID in the first column, then the room name or the block name as we set it up when we created the time blocks. The code and the type will populate once we assign the sessions, as well as the title. The order of the display is based on the days of the week and the times of the time blocks we set up, so it's in ascending order throughout. So the first step is going to pick a room or a block that we want to work with. So I'm going to pick block ID 66, and I'm going to select session 2 down below. I'll get a confirmation. I'll refresh my page. And now the fields you can see populate at the top of the time block 66 in room 1, the GS002 code. It's an oral presentation, and that field is what's populating from the form type that I made the note on in the form creation page when we were creating the session form. The title is pulling in from the name of the session that we called the session when we set it up, and you can see it's scheduled for Monday from 8 till 11. So the next step is to go ahead and click on another room or time block we want to set up, and I'm going to go ahead and select session 3, GS003, and when I select that, you can see I got a confirmation pop up that's actually a conflict notice. We have conflict checking in this, and what it's basically telling us is that Mrs. Davidson is already in another time block, which is number 66, which you can track that at the top table, and in room 1 you can see she's scheduled from 8 to 11. Looking to the right side of the time block 69, you can see that's from 10:30 to noon, so you can see the reason for the conflict. Now, we've built in the ability you can override this and schedule her anyway by clicking the OK button, or if you don't want to have that conflict, you would click on the cancel button. In this case, we're going to click on cancel. And then we can scroll down and we can pick another time frame where she would not have a conflict. And refresh the page. You don't necessarily have to refresh every single time. I'm just doing it to show you. And then we'll do our final session, assign it to that time block, and then that's complete. Now some other things to show you. Let's go back to the create time blocks now. And you'll see our time blocks. If you remember the days of the week, you see in room 1, if you recall, we originally named this that default, where we named it default, but once we assigned a session to it, the name changed. So if you were to delink that session, it would go back to the words default. So you could use that as a placeholder, as I stated earlier, for some other administrative reason why you would need to track that time block. Maybe you'd pre-program what type submissions you would put in there. While we wrap this up, let me take the time to thank you for sticking with this. I know this was a long video, but as I said in the beginning, this can be one of the more challenging areas of comprehension and employment in Abstract Studio. Hopefully we're able to teach you something that'll help you move forward and get this in place for your own organization. Let me give you a few points of things that I think may be helpful. First thing is, you may want to review this video again for understanding if needed. Save it and share it with your other staff members that may have to use this portion of Abstract Studio. Be sure to review the definitions in the beginning in the video. A lot of times that's a point of misunderstanding, and just understanding the difference between submissions and sessions and that. Review the documentation that we include with your implementation. As I mentioned, Section 6 in the documentation covers session management and may prove helpful to help answer any questions that may come up. And then do a test event and practice with the sessions to solidify your understanding. Actually doing the tasks will often help you solidify and better understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. Again, thanks again, and as always, if you have any questions or comments or requests, you can reach us at info@ensync-corp.com or call us directly at 817-335-7962, extension 1. Thanks again, and have a great day.